My name is Dusty Breeding, and I'm an integrated wealth coach and the founder of a coaching practice that I call the Skull and Bone Society. I help people live with the end in mind and build wealth without losing their soul.
There's a really imposing force in society that's kind of saying like there's nothing you can do about it. That probably always exists, but I feel like I'm noticing it more than ever, where it's like there's always a reason it's not your fault. There's always a reason you need to take on debt, or there's a reason you'll never be able to buy a home, or so specifically in the finance area, it bleeds through in a lot of like social issues and political issues. And we don't have to attack that head on, but more the general sense of like what steps, what can someone do to go from victim mentality in their finances to like taking control, even when there's too much month at the end of the paycheck. That's the idea. And I feel like your story is a good example. Also, to be really frank, I've known a lot of people. I've been like, I feel blessed. I've gotten to know and be a part of a lot of people's lives and seen different, I don't know, like displays of people pursuing wealth. And you're the only person that I've ever known in real life who has done it or like become actually financially independent. And I know people who have a lot, but they have a lot through debt, through leverage. And so I more specifically want to look at this kind of simpler version, like how do you become independent and you don't have those anxieties? Is it possible?
Really throughout my life, I've been someone who has desired to live well, holistically. I've always been someone who I like nice things. My wife will tell you that. But I also like, being out in the woods for weeks on end and roughing it. And so I think that that's played out throughout the course of my life. That I've always been someone who seeks integration and what I would call now wealth in a variety of different areas. And I would say that that was not always financial. As I think back to my background, I grew up in a rural town in Indiana. I think we probably had 800 or 900 people in the town that I grew up in, and grew up below the poverty line at various points throughout my life. My dad worked in a factory, a warehouse, his entire career, and we there were some years where we were legitimately below the poverty line, and there were some years where we were right above it. So I can't say that we were always below the poverty line, but the poverty line was pretty close. You could always see it from where we were financially as a family. And so that's just how I grew up, and I didn't know any other way. We were very wealthy in love and faith and great relationships, but economically didn't have much. And so that was a theme throughout my life, and that I think also helped me get where I was, because I received a fair bit of government financial aid to attend the colleges that I attended. And so I ended up, at Pepperdine, out in the West Coast, and met my wife at Pepperdine, and we spent our first year of marriage living and working in East Africa with street kids. And it was while we were living in East Africa that we got our first email from our college loan company, or my college loan. I was the only one who had loans in the family. And that I would say that is a moment that I'll never forget. We were living in a small village outside of Nairobi, and I was on the Wi-Fi and got this email, and I had this moment of like, oh, I took out a lot of loans and now I have to pay them back. And so I remember that very specifically. So I think that's a moment in time. But maybe even backing up before that, I would say the thing that was a catalyst to the financial journey that I've been on, that my wife and I have been on, was actually a therapy session that we had in premarital counseling. Cecily and I had been dating for about a year, felt like it was serious, and we said, hey, if you're serious about something, you should invest in it and make it better. And so we started going to premarital counseling, and we did the Prepare and Rich assessment, which is like a little compatibility test. And our therapist who we still work with to this day, 14 years later. His name's Robert.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really cool. But he said, I've got good news and bad news. And he said, the good news is your results on the compatibility test say you are very high in compatibility. He's like, this is really great. This is one of the highest compatibility scores that I've ever seen. And he said, but there's one area where you scored as being not compatible at all. And that area is finances. And then
Okay.
he went on to say that this is important because, research indicates, depending upon what you read, finances as being either the first or number one or number two cause of divorce, conflict over finances, causing that. So that for sure was the moment where we said, hey, this money thing is real. We think about it differently, and we've got to figure something out. We've got to come up with a middle path.
And at that moment, sorry, maybe you mentioned this, but I didn't catch it. How much debt were you looking at?
At that point, I didn't know.
You just got that email and you're like, okay, debts are due.
Yeah, exactly. And so, after we got married, first year in Kenya, we were probably 6 months into marriage at this time. And I get that email. And over the course of that day, I actually received 11 emails, right? Because I didn't know this, but my loans had been, sold out to other loan companies. And so I had 11 different companies managing 11 different loans. The smallest amount owed was probably around $3,000. The largest amount owed on any single loan was like $33,000, but that also didn't include some credit card debt that I had, nor did it include the $7,000 that I owed on the Jeep that I bought with student loan money. So yeah. So in total, it ended up being around $85,000 to $90,000 in loan money or debt that I had that I brought as a gift into our new marriage. Yeah, and at the time, Cecily, and always, she has no debt. She, had some family support to get through college without debt, and so really it was. And to be honest, I don't even think we talked about the debt that I had. We were not good with finances. If you remember, the therapist was like, this is the area where you guys don't, this is not working for you. So I really think as we're sitting down and reading those emails, that may have been the first time where she's like, whoa, I married a guy who has almost $100,000 in debt, right? Yeah, she knew I had student loans, but we had never sat down and itemized them.
That's so similar to mine and Susan's story too, where once I finally got everything reeled in and knew exactly what I was dealing with, it was 88,000, a little over 88,000. And she, of course, had nothing. She's actually very good with money, and her whole family is very good with money. So we eventually had a reckoning. But it is interesting, like for a while, in the young mind, you can just sort of ignore it, or I don't know. I remember this feeling like the first time I finally sat down to get a handle on everything, which was after reading some one page in Total Money Makeover. I was like, I need to figure out exactly what I have. What am I dealing with? And I didn't want to do it. There was a part of me that was like the experiment where the cat in the box, if you don't know if it's alive or dead, it's both. Yeah. I'm like, as long as I don't know what it is, it's almost better.
What was it better? Was it better knowing or not knowing?
At first it was terrible. It was like, oh no, this is bad, and it's piling up. Then I realized this is how I learned the way that interest rates work. I didn't. Embarrassingly, I had no idea. And college didn't teach me, which is my own fault. I mean, it's not like I was studying math or anything or economics. So yeah, I started figuring out, oh, this is bad. Yeah. So, okay. Well, so you guys, eventually you're dealing with it, or you're at least seeing that it's there. What happened? Like, what caused you to, because the way I see it most of the time, and the way I saw it in my family, is when a large debt was revealed, which surprisingly happened often, it just turned into fighting, bickering, taking out more loans, like just actually perpetuating it and making it worse. Yeah. Why is it? How did you guys choose a different path? And why is that so rare?
That's such a good question. And I can speak to maybe our experience and some of the experiences I have now with clients in the work that I do. But I think for us, something that was really critical was we, when we got married, we had a marriage and have always had a marriage really founded on teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
And we never clarified that. That wasn't like we didn't sit down and say like, all right, what kind of marriage do we want? Well, let's make a team. So it was never strategic.
Mm-hmm.
But for a variety of reasons, maybe that's just how it was. And so, to my wife's credit, w- she took it in stride. There was no blaming or no, oh my gosh, you've ruined our financial future, or why didn't I know about this?
Yeah.
It was very much like, okay, well, this is a reality. How do we how do we how do we make this better? And and so I think we both had that mindset of like we want to make this better, and
Mm-hmm.
we didn't know what to do. And maybe the wisest thing we've ever done in our lives, and something we try to hold on to, is when we don't know, we try to seek out wisdom of people who we think know. And um I think the way it happened was, I think my wife was talking with someone, a family member, about just financial stress, and we realized we could no longer stay in East Africa. We couldn't afford. We needed jobs that paid more
Okay.
of a legitimate salary, because we were looking at about $1,000 a month in student loan payments. And so a family member recommended that we read Dave Ramsey's The Total Money Makeover. I'd never heard of it, didn't know anything about Dave Ramsey.
Yeah.
I downloaded the ebook on Kindle, and while we were in East Africa, and Cecily and I read the book. I think we read it in like 4 or 5 days. I mean, we just consumed it,
Mm-hmm.
and it gave us hope, and it gave us a plan, and that's all we needed. And those two things, hope and a plan, were the catalyst to take a situation that I had gotten us into, and turn it around to be what we consider now to be one of the strongest areas in our marriage and our relationship, which is our unity on finances, our partnership and money, and our kind of shared philosophy or theology even of wealth. So that was a big moment for us, seeking out that wisdom.
Between the two of you, there was this kind of just immediate action. You wanted to like figure out how can we make it better. So it seems like either your personalities were just were such that you were just like compatible enough, I guess, or like-minded enough that that's what you did, or maybe you were being guided. Maybe it was Robert, your counselor. Um, like what? That's the thing I'm trying to get at. Is like there are ways, right, to reach out to people, to get wisdom, to seek help. Like, but how do you? I don't know. Why don't people do that? I guess I'm getting at a psychological thing here, a little bit. But later it might also get into a resource or privilege question, maybe. But for now, it's like, what is that thing? What caused you to seek help?
I, I think maybe two things that I can think of that maybe made our situation what it was, which is not necessarily unique, but it was just the way our worlds combined. I have a low tolerance for distress in my life,
Oh, okay.
and that, especially relational distress.
Mm.
I don't like conflict. I don't love marital conflict, and I inherited that. I learned that from my family of origin, and that the history there is my dad's parents went through a divorce, and my dad was a teenager, and he saw his mom at the time leave his dad and run off with another man, and my dad was 16 years old, and he had that. I would say that was some unresolved trauma that he never really worked through, therapeutically. I think he managed it in his own way, but something that happened was he always lived with the fear that his wife would do the same. And so I grew up in a household where my dad was just never like distrusting of my mom, but he built a life that was very interconnected, and and I never saw them have lots of conflict. I don't have any memories of them verbally arguing. I can't remember a single time where they raised their voices at one another.
Wow.
I'm sure they had conflict, but it was uh, very constrained and private. And so I just didn't grow up seeing great conflict management because my parents didn't seem to have a lot of it, or didn't. I didn't see it, and so I learned that you just, like, you want to have a good partnership, you want to have peace in the marriage, and so I've never liked things that stress our relationship. And so I think when this money thing started to rear its head, I realized, like, oh man, this is a big deal. I want to have a great marriage. How I we need to take some action. Cecily is more passive, like she's a little more comfortable with conflict. And so I think if it had been up to her, probably would have been like, oh yeah, we'll just, make payments. And so I think I definitely brought this intensity of we need to figure this out. We cannot live
Yeah.
under this financial stress, and maybe some guilt that I was showing up with the debt. She didn't have it, and it's like, all right, this is what I'm bringing. And so I think I maybe brought some intensity, and she responded to that and was like, yeah, this is great. Let's knock this out. Let's figure out how to do this. So I think that played a big part in it. But also, I would say one tool that our therapist taught us that I think is beneficial for anyone is what he called, and what we've learned as being like we call it like the nightly check-in. And so something that he taught us early on in our marriage that we did every night for years, and now we do it regularly, but maybe not every night. We just did it last night, but it's this habit of sitting down, laying down as you're going to sleep, and saying, what's one thing you liked about us today, and then what's one thing you didn't like about us today, about your relationship. And so I think that was a tool that helped us have good communication about our finances and good communication about marriage in general. And we learned that, and that was a tool that we implemented, kind of through this time as we're realizing the amount of debt we're in. How are we going to manage this? We had created a space to have potentially challenging conversations because of that habit that we developed. So I think it's a blend of maybe family of origin stuff combined with some tools that we learned along the way.
That piece at the end there seems fundamental. That, like, when you ask a question, what did you like about us today? And then what did you not like about us today? Um, I think there are people who have been with someone for a long time and they would still be uncomfortable to ask or answer that question.
Yeah.
Because it could bring up conflict, or, I don't know. I find, there's, in this interview, there's no way for me not to project a little bit of things I'm going through as I get into like my late 30s, as we're getting older. It's like, why do I hide from myself? Why do I deceive my own self and get sensitive to being challenged when it's like the challenge could make me better? I think that's kind of a thing at the core that I wanted to bubble up a little bit. And that what you're saying there, kind of, it's just a practice, right? You just practice it. And also, crucially, you have two people or whatever parties involved are agreeing to that. I think one thing I'm wondering about, we're talking a little bit about the narrative and the emotions. In your mind, are there like specific steps you would give someone who's just like in that place where they're totally in debt, their job doesn't pay enough to cover the debt and the rent and the groceries and everything? How do you help this person?
Yeah. And what you just described is the average American,
Yeah.
right? And so I think this is a really important question, because it is not some people's struggle. It's actually the predominant struggle of of our country. And I think that's important to remember. Often when I talk about wealth, or when we talk about these issues, you've traveled significantly internationally. We've spent some time abroad, and I recognize that a lot of the conversations I have with people relating to money or relating to wealth should be categorized or clarified by that delineation. I was reading that something like the wealthiest 10 countries in the world, their median per capita income is 50 times the median per capita income of the 10 poorest countries in the world, right? So there's a different conversation when you start to think globally. But to your question about how we navigate those things and the steps, I think one of the most important things anyone can do to take control of their financial situation is pick a plan and stick with it. In modern times, like if you jump on socials and if you Google the internet, there are a million different recommendations for how to get yourself into a better place financially. And in fact, I would say lots of them might be effective, but what I find is a problem is that people bounce around. Take a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'll use a little bit of this wisdom, a little bit of that wisdom, and so you kind of make a conglomeration of good financial ideas, and often in that pursuit, you end up going nowhere, right? And so for us, we literally just followed Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps. And I always feel like an infomercial for Dave Ramsey, but we paid off all of our debt by following the plan from a book that you can get at Goodwill or any secondhand store for $1. And we just followed the plan. So we just literally step by step through the plan. And since then I've learned more, I've grown more, I have new things that we do that still fall within that framework, but that was the original source document for our process. And so I think it's a great structure, but I also think if you were to find some other plan that you think was effective, as long as you do it and give it time. I think that's the big mistake is there's just not enough time committed to the journey. But for us, a couple key things: an emergency fund, setting aside enough money. We started with $1,000 emergency fund. The $1,000 emergency fund was really critical because it broke my habit and addiction to swiping the credit card anytime something came up. So we established the emergency fund, and then we started getting on a budget. And those two things were really critical to our starting point, that we created a monthly cash flow plan. We created a monthly budget that we have been implementing and using and doing every month for the last really 12 or 13 years, since we didn't start day one of our marriage, but about 13 years we've been doing a budget. And I have all of those documents. I literally could show you every dollar that we've earned and every dollar we've spent for 13 years. We've been tracking it. And so that tool, the budget, was really critical.
So for people who just want the answers, right? I think that's something that the illusion of social media offers you, this like the quick answer to everything. But for someone who's like, okay, I get that. I'll choose one of these financial gurus and they have a bunch of reviews of people who say it works. I'm just going to stick with their plan. You said it's just a matter of time, but how much time? Like I'm so impatient and I can't stick to anything unless I know exactly what the horizon looks like. What do you say to me?
The Ramsey plan, Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover, they've actually done the research. And when people start on the process, it's 18 to 24 months to become debt free. That's the standard. That's the typical path out of debt, 18 to 24 months. I think the average American has something like around $30,000 in debt. And so their research suggests that within 18 to 24 months, you can pay off your debt. There may be other programs that do it. There may be other programs that do it faster, but I think there's just not a lot of data in those programs. And so some people hate Dave Ramsey, some people love him. I just consider the work that he's done as a tool. And one of the things that he has done is he's provided quantitative data for the process. And so that's what I tell people. Once you start the process, if you want to pay off your debt, you're looking at least a couple years before you become debt free. There are a lot of factors that may influence that, right? How much you earn, how much you owe, but you're looking at least 2 years before you maybe get to a point of finding freedom from debt, not including the mortgage. That's an important element. But it could be faster or it could take a lot longer. And a lot of that depends on your commitment to the process, right?
I assume that like when clients come to you, they probably come from a lot of different places with a lot of different financial situations. They're probably not just getting started on their journey. I mean, if I assume that if I were seeking out like a financial advisor, it's probably because I have wealth to be advised on. Um, but if I guess what if you want, you can sort of touch on the different places people might be. But what I ultimately want to hear about is financial independence, because I think it's unique in the space. I've got plenty of friends who love sending me Grant Cardone videos and different, you know the type I'm talking about, where it's
sure.
just everything is debt, everything is like, it's assertive, it's bombastic. There's an alpha male kind of thing that kind of goes with it
Yeah.
too. But
Yeah.
then on the financial independence side, I'm personally attracted to it because it's almost like minimalism for finances. And to me, that might connect a little bit with what you said about having a low tolerance for conflict. That's kind of how I've been reading into financial independence, and I'm just learning. Actually, I'm fresh, so you can tell me what you think it is, how you achieved it, if you've achieved it, all that.
The clients that I work with are all across the spectrum socioeconomically and in their situation in life. I would say my lowest income client that I've worked with since I started my integrated wealth coaching practice of working with people about finances, but not just finances, not just money, talking about wealth holistically. But my lowest income client probably earning around $40,000 or $45,000 a year, family of four, which in the United States, regardless of where you live, is not a lot of money. My highest income client are netting close to $1 million a year, and so all over the spectrum. And something that I see that comes up for all my clients is everyone desires more money. It doesn't matter how much you make. If you make 40,000 a year or if you make 100,000 a month, everyone desires more money. And and I think the question that I like to clarify with them is, what do you want more money for? Some people legitimately need more money. If you can't pay your bills, if you are living minimally, if you're living at the poverty line, you actually need more money. You need more resources. If you are earning in the United States, um, if you're earning 150,000 or 200,000 or more, and maybe not living in New York City or California, there are some caveats there. But if you're a six-figure earning household or more, 250 plus, money is probably not what you need more of. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's always can be great to have more, but the question becomes, what do you want that for? And that's where the kind of the integrated wealth coaching comes in, is because we have to clarify what you are trying to achieve with your money so that we know what you even need money for. I think of money as being merely a tool. It Money has no morality in and of itself. Money is not good or bad. Having more of it doesn't make you a better person. Um, Having less of it doesn't make you a bad person. So it's simply a tool. And in my work as a financial coach, one of the things that I have to clarify with clients is what they actually want in their future. That's the vision. That's what we're working towards. And then that helps you understand how you use money as a tool to accomplish that vision. So if money is the end goal, if more money in the bank account is what you're seeking, I guarantee you will not find contentedness, peace, or joy or happiness in that. Money's just a tool. It's like having more hammers in your garage. No one gets super stoked. Or I shouldn't say no one. Most people aren't super stoked by just having more hammers. They buy hammers to build something. And money is like a hammer. Money helps you build something. So you have to clarify what you want to build first, and then we can decide how much money you need. You were we were getting at the financial independence element of the conversation, right? And I have some thoughts that I would love to share regarding that, because I do think that financial independence is a buzzword. In I can't say for everyone, but I feel like our age group, right? Like if you are maybe 25 to 45, and I'm just making up those numbers. I don't have any data to support this, but anecdotally, my conversations with 25 to 45-year-olds is, how can I achieve financial independence, or I want to achieve financial independence. And as a wealth coach, that's something that we talk about. And I think that financial independence is actually not accessible to everyone. And what I mean by that is, if you are defining financial independence as having enough money somewhere where you can sit on your boat and drink cocktails and not do anything, that level of financial success and wealth is probably not accessible to everyone. And obviously, when we're talking globally, as we mentioned before, like this isn't even a conversation for people in developing countries. In the United States, there are even maybe some situations in life where that level of finances is not necessarily a realistic goal, in my opinion. Now, what I would say is that anyone can make progress regardless of where you're at in the world or in the United States. You can work towards increasing your financial situation. But something that comes up is that freedom always comes on the back of discipline. My favorite theologian, Richard Foster, says every discipline has its corresponding freedom. So if you want financial independence, if you want financial freedom, that means, by definition, there's going to need to be some discipline to achieve that. And that's maybe where my conversation comes in with clients is, what does financial independence mean to you? Does it really mean you do nothing? You have no job. You have no W-2 income. You have no 1099 income. You have no side hustle. You literally just want to sit and do nothing and have money, mailbox money. People will say, I want mailbox money that just shows up in my mailbox. If that's really your goal, probably, in my opinion, one of the only ways to truly have stress-free mailbox money is through a mutual fund or index fund that has such an amount of money in it that it's just kicking off dividends that can sustain your life. That, in my opinion, that might be the least amount of stress to achieve mailbox money, but that requires a lot of money. You probably hear people talk about like the 4% rule, 4% being the amount that you can theoretically safely withdraw off of your investments to sustain, life without that account being deleted. And even the 4% rule, based on the research, that I think the data on that was that it was only a 30-year time span that percentage was verified for at least 30 years. So if you're trying to be financially independent at 25, we don't really know, what percent you can pull off of that for 70 years of life. But you would have to have such a pot of money to have mailbox money coming in off of your investments, that for some people, the juice probably isn't worth the squeeze, or might not be worth the squeeze. I'm a fan of thinking maybe more strategically or holistically about what financial independence looks like. So I don't think that sitting on a boat and drinking cocktails and not doing anything is healthy. I actually don't think that's a good way to live. I think if you are doing that at the age of 35, I think that will come with other forms of stress and distress that is not life-giving. So instead, I like to think about those disciplines and freedoms. Where do you want more freedom, and where are you willing to be disciplined and engaged?
So I think it's really clear at this point that the journey, whichever journey you choose, let's say it's just, in general, it's goal oriented, it's net positive, and in the financial independence sense, it's as simplified as possible. So this is really like just changing your whole life. This is like changing your mindset, your frame of reference, your relationship to money, And change is hard. Also, for a lot of people, it's scary. So let's say that you have a client who is like ready to go, ready to change, but their spouse is not. What, because it's typically going to be for people who are maybe 25, 30 plus. It's not just them. How do you, what can a person do to, maybe this is getting into the marriage counseling territory, but I would think there's so many people watching this who are going to be like, yeah, but my wife or my husband would never go for these changes.
That's such a great point, and a really critical part of this conversation, because if you're in a marriage, you're in a partnership, and if um, if there's not clarity on what you are working towards together, you will not only not achieve that because it's not been clarified, so you're not going to randomly end up at some unclarified goal, but it's likely that you are literally spinning your wheels at best, and at worst, you're working against one another financially. Um, I do think that this is a big conflict in relationships, where one person will have the inspiration to seek financial independence. They'll come home, they maybe have been listening to some great podcasts and are really inspired by how quickly they could, start a real estate investing company and buy rental properties. And if we just take out a second mortgage on the home to put down payments on, a $500,000 apartment complex, we'll be millionaires. And, so like a lot of times there's passion that a partner comes home with, and they present it to their spouse, and their spouse hears risk. They hear disciplines that they didn't want to be a part of. They didn't agree to dropping their spending level so low. Maybe sometimes these visions of wealth include a partner going back to work or getting another certification or improving their income, and maybe they don't want to do that. Maybe their vision is actually more time at home with the family. And so I think, from working with clients, from being married and navigating this with my wife, the critical step is setting time aside to dream together and build a vision for the future. So one of the first things that I do with clients who come in and say, we want more money or we want to build wealth, we actually don't talk about money or wealth. We talk about their values, their shared values, the thing that matters to them as individuals and the things that matter to them as a couple, and then what life they would like to build based on those values. So we do a 10-year vision process. I have them write out a 10-year vision, and they share it with me, and they have to sit down and talk about the elements of their dream life a decade from now. And the more they can articulate what that looks like, what I've found is that serves as the inspiration and motivation for any financial changes that need to be made to achieve it. But if there's not clarity on that vision, if a couple has not taken the time to think about it, or maybe it's just not fleshed out enough, right? If it's not clear, that really impacts, I think, the day-to-day process to achieve it.
So anyone who comes to you is kind of getting a 2-for-1. This is some basically marriage counseling that's being filibuster, or is that the word? A writer on the bill of like learning financial, practices.
They totally are. And I always joke, like, I'm definitely not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a marriage counselor. I have none of those certifications. If when I work with clients, if their marriage gets better, that's a celebration. I'm stoked for that. And I think that many would say that it has. But I don't bill that as it's not a part of the deal. No promises on how great your marriage will be. But to your point, I mean, think about what's happening. Like, when you sit down and dream with someone, that's an intimate experience. When you articulate what a day looks like a decade from now, where you're waking up, what you're saying to one another when you wake up, who's in the room with you, what pets are at your feet, and what you're doing with your day, that is such a bonding experience. And then that brings you together with finances, because it allows you to say, all right, if that's the goal, how are we going to get there? And then that creates the plan. and then you have buy-in on the plan. And if you can keep that vision, that image of the future in front of you, very physically, like my wife and I have, our goals board where we write up things that we're working towards, or little things that we want to buy, or little uh, financial elements of things related to the people that we want to be. Those things are visual. We write them up and on a board, and that reminds us, okay, that's what we're working towards. And I think that makes our marriage better. I think if couples would dial in their finances, I really think we would see a significant decrease in divorce.
Okay, so someone comes to you and they're like, uh, good and great, this doesn't need to be political at all. But hey, you're like a white guy, and you went to a good college, and the system is against me, and you can think of all the things that someone might say, and I don't want to ignore it because there are real factors, and I do think people start out in different settings and levels of the game. But what's sort of an elevated or a wisdom that can pierce through that?
Well, like you said, I don't want to discount those experiences, and I believe that there are, and there might be more than I know, systems that create serious difficulties for a variety of people. Um, Everyone's experience is drastically different. I like I said, I my experience of growing up in a family below the poverty line on occasion is different than other people in my same town who had similar jobs, and in part because my family was different. They had a deep rooted Christian faith, and that manifests itself in belief in the goodness of the individual. And so I grew up in a home that was very encouraging, a home where my mom and dad always said that if I trusted God, I could accomplish anything I wanted to accomplish. And so, even if the finances are similar, even if your socioeconomic situation is similar, even if the constraints of whatever system you are feeling, or is oppressing you or holding you back, even if those are similar, everyone's context is different even then. So there's no such thing, I would say, as like a truly equal footing on any level of the spectrum. Um, so so with that said, I think the critical thing is to acknowledge that whatever you feel or is holding you back, but not allow it to be the thing that prevents you from making progress. So wherever you're at today, progress is good. If you are really struggling to get by or pay the bills, a little bit of progress is better than nothing. And I think that's that's really critical, because if you allow whatever it is that's preventing you from progress, or if you feel like it's unfair that someone has more financial resources than you, if we allow that to be the defining reason as to why we don't make progress, or the reason that we don't take action, the only person that gets hurt in that process is the self, is you, is me. If I allow that to be my rhetoric of the problems that I've faced in my life. So one of the things that I teach as a coach is Covey's 7 habits, the 7 habits of highly effective people. And one of the habits is, Covey talks about managing what's within your circle of influence, meaning what are the things that you can take control of? What are the little tiny things? And I think that's the key, regardless of whatever form of oppression or situational um, struggle that they exist in. You have to start by finding the smallest thing that is within your control. I don't know what that would be. Obviously, there are a lot of situations, but I think it you have to take action. I mean, that's been shown in all research about anxiety or depression, that action is the antidote to those things. Action is the antidote to chaos, and so I think that's just really critical. That ownership, doing what you can with what you have, and it might not be fair. But that's just the reality that we have.
Yeah, I like that. It may not be fair, but if you don't progress in whatever way you can within your sphere, the only person who gets hurt is you.
Yeah,
Uh,
Bill Gates is not losing any sleep over the fact that he makes more money than I do, right?
right.
Like if I hated Bill Gates because he's a billionaire, or Elon Musk, um, he is not losing any sleep. Doesn't bother him at all. And so if I let it bother me, that's on me, right? Like
Yeah.
if I am angry, or if I allow that to prevent me from pursuing better or growth in myself, that's that's my fault. That's not his fault.
Hmm. Something that I've noticed, I notice it especially so I've just come out of almost 3 years of army life training, and now I'm reserve, and I'm like suddenly thrown into looking for a job after I've been doing a very rigorous job for the last 2.5+ years. And it's helpful. I'm coming out with that attitude of like I just need to hustle and find something where I can contribute. And also, it's like in the world of jobs and the world of money, people like, for lack of a better way to say this, people like bitching about it. It's part of the identity of like being a modern middle class human, or at least in the US, I feel like it is like just kind of hating your job or hating your situation. Venting about it is kind of something that helps you bond with other people. So how I don't know, do you have anything to say on that? How do you navigate that? Because I feel like it should be done. There's a bunch of like motivational self-development literature and content out there that's like, just get new friends, just get a new job. But it's not really that simple. You might be pretty ingrained in your community. So how do you navigate basically those identity changes that may need to take place?
The transformation of your personal identity, or the stories you tell yourself, or the perception of your reality, might be the hardest of all of this. I tell people all the time, becoming financially wealthy is a very simple equation. If you want to be a millionaire, if you want to be a multimillionaire, you just need to spend less than you make and invest the difference and do it forever. And you will be wealthy, right? I mean, if you start at 25, all the metrics show this. If you launch your S&P 500 Roth IRA, 25 years old, you're going to be a multimillionaire by 65 if you do it every year. Um, so that part, the mathematical equation part, is not hard. And so I think that's what's interesting about all of the things that you can read or see online, all these different tools and tricks of how to build wealth, or how to get rich, or how to get rich quick. Um, that the mathematical side of wealth building is actually not that complicated. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's the transformation of identity. It's changing the stories that you tell yourself, the way you think about your work, the way you think about yourself, the way you think about your skills and your purpose in your life. Like that's the hard work. And that's why in my coaching, it's an integrated process. It's not just dollars and cents. We talk about dollars and cents, those are important, but we talk about why do you have the job that you have? Is it the right job for you to have? Is it income based? Is it skill based? Is it you just randomly fell into it? And I think that is one of the ways that you can change your story, is by recognizing that you have taken some action, you've taken some element of control that has gotten you to this place. It always cracks me up when I hear people like hating on their job. My thought is, you applied for that job, right? Like they didn't drag you into the workplace. They're not forcing you to work there. Now you may have needed a job. You may have needed to pay the bills. Um, and if that's the case, I think what we're talking about is a mindset shift. Like, even if you work in a miserable job, if you're doing that for a reason, you have to capture that reason. If it's to feed your family, you have to celebrate I'm doing something that sucks. I hate this place, terrible bosses, but I'm so glad that it's allowing me to care for my family. And that might be enough to keep you dialed in the game. Doesn't make it fun, but I think it's important. I think something I think about a lot is the what I call like the truth and the lie dialogues, and I think that there's a truth that work is meaningful and necessary, but it's a lie that hating your job is required. Because a lot of times you'll hear people hate on their job, hate their work. It almost seems like the thing you need to say or the thing you need to do to kind of fit in with corporate culture. But ultimately, like if you hate your work and you have options, that's on you, right? Like do something else or reframe how you do what you do. We talked a little bit about financial independence, and I think financial independence is a meaningful goal if you can clarify what that means to you. And financial independence looks different to a lot of my clients. And I think clarifying exactly what it means, what you're seeking, really sets the stage for your ability to achieve it. And I think for us in our life, as we think about what that journey towards financial independence looked like, it was a commitment to living a life based on our terms, meaning we had as much say in all elements of life as possible. And I would say that it's a spectrum. It's not you either are financially independent or you are not financially independent. Instead, I think it's you are more financial independent or you are less financial independent. And so where we're at today is more financially independent than we've ever been. We I, and some notable points on that journey, we became debt free probably 12 years ago, paid off all of our debt, um, and then essentially have been debt free entirely since then. We bought some rental properties that started providing what people would call passive income, and I quickly learned passive income is a misnomer, because if you've ever owned a rental property, you know that it is not passive at all. It might be flexible, and this gets to that definition of financial independence. If you want a little more control over your schedule, owning rental properties might allow that. You might be able to work remotely or things like that, but it is most definitely not passive. Um, and then, we ended up kind of stepping out of that game, the rental game, to be able to sell all of those houses and pay cash for a primary residence. And so that was a critical moment. And then a couple of years ago, we hit the kind of debt-free millionaire mark as far as our net worth is concerned. And so where we're at is what people may call like barista fire, barista financial independence, retire early, meaning uh, today we have enough in retirement that could essentially fund all of our living expenses, but it's in retirement, right? So it's not in an account that we access regularly. So instead, we work, but we have incredible freedom in our work. We only do jobs that we love. We say yes to adventures and things that we are in charge of. And I think for us, that is our definition of financial independence. It's not never working again, but instead is doing work that we love and that's meaningful to us, regardless of what it pays, because we're not seeking it merely for the salary. And so I think that's been some components to our financial independence journey.
And I guess just on that real quick, I'm curious how once you were debt free and you had so I'm sure you had this experience too. The experience that I've had is after debt free is like you're so used to feeding the void with your money that once you're debt free, it's like suddenly the money starts piling up. If you and you know, so there's that kind of silver lining. It helped develop that habit of like, well, I already put aside like 50% of all my earnings to this thing.
Yeah.
What if I just roll that habit over into what? Index funds, Bitcoin, Roth. How do you choose what and where?
That's a great question. And again, I think that aligns with what you're trying to build, what life you're trying to build. And when you clarify what the future looks like, that determines the right vehicle to get you there, the right tool. For some people who love their jobs and want to work forever, it's totally fine to just go hard into your retirement, if you like working. Other people want more time freedom, and so it might be worth seeking things that provide more cash flow now, rental properties, dividend stocks, things like that. Um, a lot of times people will argue in the financial community over like what has the best return on investment. But if you are wealthy, objectively, what's it matter, right? Like I'm just thinking for the wealthiest people, if we're talking billions, what's it matter if you have 400 billion or 500 billion? You're doing okay. And in our situation in life, when I'm interacting with other millionaires, life is good. No one who has a debt-free net worth of over $1 million should be complaining. Um, and there's no point in like losing sleep over which retirement or investing vehicle gets 1% better or worse. That's just my opinion. Because I think life is about more than just math. I think it's about the life you want to live. So I think that's part of it. But kind of to your point, when I talk with clients, I think there are three important things to think about. You need to think about how you earn your money, how you keep your money, and how you spend your money. And usually usually people struggle in one of those areas. They might be good at earning money and saving money, but they just struggle to spend it. And these are the people who have big retirement accounts but live very meagerly, right? And some people might call them misers. It's the wealthy uncle who doesn't buy you any Christmas gifts, right? It's kind of that vibe. Um, I don't think that's living well. But the opposite is true too. Like if you're good at spending money, but you're not good at earning money, you're gonna have problems. And so I think finding the right balance between all of those is really critical. And for people who have cultivated the skill of financial discipline, I've learned that the spending part is really difficult, right? You build this habit of being constrained, you build this habit of being fiscally responsible, and then all of a sudden you start to be afraid to spend money. And I don't think that's ideal either. I think finding that balance is good.
Well, it is weird, and I can speak to that experience a little bit with my wife and I. We're like, I think we've been so determined to first to get debt free and then to save and then hit certain benchmarks that it's really hard. Like we have to hype each other up for days or weeks or months to just go buy new clothes.
Yeah.
Like we just don't like spending money unless it's like a real specific thing that we love, like travel, as you had mentioned. It's like we love to travel, but then it's a matter of having time to do it. So it's kind of interesting just sometimes being in situations where it's like, well, we have plenty of money, but I don't know even how to do anything about that. Like I've got a bunch of hammers and I don't know what to build.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common in people who have been really dialed in financially. And I'll never forget once we paid off our debt, we at that point in our life 12 years ago, we were making about $5,000 a month student loan payments. And at the time we were earning, I think we were up to about 80,000 a year. So almost half, maybe more than half of our monthly income was going to debt repayment. And we were living very small, right? I mean, we were not doing anything fun. We were scraping by to pay off this debt. But I remember driving by a billboard, and Alex, you probably remember where this is at. This is over in Calabasas. There's like car dealership area, the Mercedes dealership. There's a Audi dealership, and there was a dealership at the time on the corner. Now it's a Harley dealership, but at the time it was a Ferrari dealership. And there was a billboard that had the lease terms for a new Ferrari. And at the time, I think it was like $2,800 a month. You could lease a new Ferrari. And I'll never forget driving by that sign. And that month we had paid like a $5,000 student loan payment. And it was one of our final payments. And I had this moment where I realized, man, with what we've been paying in student loans every month, my wife and I both could lease Ferraris, right? And it was like this moment of it was like the siren song, right? Like the sirens were calling. They wanted me to crash into the rocks of the Ferrari dealership and lease a Ferrari. And what's wild is like we could have done it. We could have afforded to do that. We would have been car poor, like paying a Ferrari lease, and it would have been stupid. But now, as your wealth builds, you get to a point where it's kind of a question of if you could afford something like that, if you could afford paying cash. My wife and I had this conversation recently about like what car we would buy. If you can afford to pay cash for essentially any vehicle within reason, any vehicle under maybe for us, we were looking at something under $80,000. If you can pay cash for that, what's the right vehicle, right? Because we could pay 80,000 for a car, or we could pay 10,000 and have 70,000 to do something else, right? And so these for sure are luxury problems. They're wealthy problems. I don't deny that. But you can trip yourself up and get in your head about what's this? What should I spend my money on? Because time is a proxy for money, or money is a proxy for time. So an $80,000 car, that's a lot of hours worth of work. So you have to decide, was the work, what is the purchase worth the work that you needed to invest to get that? So, and I think that's different for everyone, but I do think spending money, if after you've been so disciplined for so long, is a struggle for many.